Okay, so hello and welcome to another episode of Grief Unedited. This is a space where we have real and honest, put my teeth in, real, honest and raw conversations about grief. I'm your host, Karen Lafferty, and I'm an accredited counsellor specialising in grief and have worked with people for over a decade to help them navigate their journey through loss. If you do want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and both of those are at Continuum Counselling. And my website is www.continuumcounselling.com. Now, I always start by acknowledging that this podcast is purely for educational purposes. So the views that are expressed are my own and they don't represent the views of any of the third parties that I work with or on behalf of. And I always want to give just a bit of a content warning ahead of the episode because these conversations are real and we know that grief can be quite difficult to hear and to hold. And I would encourage you to just listen to your own internal compass of how helpful this feels for you right now. Today's episode is about baby loss, and we're going to be talking about Clare's journey through miscarriage. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that if you are listening to this when it's first released, it's going to be in the middle of Baby Loss Awareness Week, which is a fantastic time of year to come together and to think about where we are as a society and the support that we can provide with baby loss. But I'm also very mindful that it can feel a wee bit saturated and a wee bit overwhelming. So it might be you decide to listen along today, or it might be that you decide to bookmark it and come back to it. But yeah, whatever feels right for you, trust your compass, listen to yourself, and go with that. So, without further ado, I wanted to introduce my guest for today. And today I've got the lovely Clare Baillie with me. Now, Clare is a friend of mine who I know through the wonderful Glasgow Girls Club. And Clare is also in the background of this podcast a lot of the time because she does some VAing for me. So, yeah, this feels like a really different episode today, Clare, because you're involved in this and you get to see all the episodes, you do all the transcription behind the background. Clare pretty much does everything that isn't just recording the podcast. So, yeah, you've got a vested interest in this, I guess, as well.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it'll be interesting transcribing my own mouth. That'll be odd.
Having to listen to yourself back in slow mo to
I
get all
know.
the words. Yeah. Do you want to start by introducing yourself, Claire? Tell people a wee bit about you, your background, yeah, what you want them to know about you.
Yeah, so hello everybody, my name's Claire, and like Karen said, we know each other through the Glasgow Girls Club. Um, I am a mum of three, although every time you go to every time you go to a doctor's appointment, they ask you how many pregnancies have you had? I always go four.
Mm.
So I'm technically a mum of four. Um, and yeah, I started my own business in the middle of lockdown because, like most people, I had done my garden and had nothing else to do. And I thought, what am I going to fill my time with now? Um, so I started up my own business as a VA because I had taken time out of the corporate world to have my second daughter, and I very quickly had my third kid. So instead of having like a year and a half off that I had initially planned, I ended up being out of the workforce for nearly 6 years.
Wow.
So I decided that I didn't want to go back into an employed job. I wanted something that was going to be family friendly. I could work around the kids and have flexibility in. And yeah, that's why I decided to start my own business. And it's honestly the best thing I've ever done. It's great. I love it.
Yes.
I've got so much flexibility, which is exactly what I wanted. I'm still earning money, and I can be around for the kids. So ticks all the boxes.
And you're bloody brilliant at it. So, if you're
Well,
in the market for a VA, definitely give Claire a shout. I can testify for you.
thanks.
So, I know obviously today we're going to be talking a bit about your experience with miscarriage. And we called today's episode Grieving the Future, and I think that is something that we're probably going to get into. But do you want to just start by kind of setting the scene? Tell us a wee bit about kind of your pregnancy initially, I guess, to kind of, yeah, bring us up to date and where you were at that point.
Okay, okay. So I was never one of those kids that was like, when I grow up, I want to have hundreds of children. So I'm the eldest of three girls. Um, my middle my middle sister, like from she was I think since she was old enough to understand she could have children, always said she wanted to have 10 kids.
Wow.
And mum, I know, right? And my mum, who's the eldest of six, was like, all right, okay, well, wait till you have one, see how you feel. Turns out she has one, and didn't have any more. And yeah, I wasn't you know, lots of girls and lots of children play with dollies and prams and stuff. I wasn't that kid. I was covered in mud, digging up worms, running about with a football under my arm. And I was 17 when I met my husband. He was 18. And we had a bit of a whirlwind romance. We moved in together after 6 months,
Wow.
got engaged really quickly. Had a lovely time. Had a really net like we had a nice life. We moved in, we bought a flat. So I was 18 with a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. And now when I think back, I'm like, holy moly, that was a lot. But
That's
actually,
wild.
yeah, and but at the time, felt like it was the right thing and everything felt amazing. So we got married in December 2004. Yeah. Oh my goodness me. I'm going back that far. 2004. And both of us knew that we wanted to have kids, but we were still young. I was 23 and he was 24. So we were like, there's no pressure. We wanted to have, a bit of a life first and stuff. So um it was about a year, just over a year later, we had a conversation about trying to have a baby. And I fell pregnant really, really quickly.
Mm.
Um and absolutely like we were both over the moon, elated. We started planning things, and my mum had a miscarriage before she had me, and she always kind of she always kind of drummed in like you don't say anything before you're 12 weeks, you get that scan first and make sure everything's okay. And it was very much that's exactly what we did. We told my mum, we told my in-laws, and that was it. We didn't tell
Mm.
anybody else because I did have that horrible fear of what if.
What a,
And yeah, we everything was fine. Like was keeping a mate. I had never been sick once. I felt sick for about 6 weeks, but other than that, I was totally great. And my friend was moving house, and I went to give her a hand, and I was really careful. I wasn't lifting anything heavy or anything like that. And she'd moved in, and everything was all lovely. And we sat down, and we're sitting. I remember it was a lovely day, like it was beautiful, sunny, shining through the window, and we were sitting down on the couch having a drink, and I was like, "Oh, I need a wee," and toddled off to the bathroom, and I had blood in my pants, and I was like, "Oh, that's not good," but I didn't, I didn't freak out because I knew that spotting was quite normal and all the rest of it. So I was like, "Right, okay." So I came home and I was chatting to my husband about like the move and everything, and I was like, "Oh, by the way, I went to the loo and I've got a bit of spotting," and he's a bit of a panic pants, whereas I'm not, so he went into panic mode and was like, "Right, we need to go to the hospital, we need to do this." So it was the weekend as well. So I phoned up the maternity ward and they asked me lots of questions and they were like, "Oh, everything's probably fine, but we'll make an appointment for you to go to so I live in East Kilbride and here Myers Hospital. I don't know if they still have it, but at the time they had a maternity day unit. So you would just
yeah.
go and get like your 12-week scan and stuff up there because the closest maternity hospital is Wishaw, which is bloody ages away.
Mhm.
So they sent me up there. So at this point I'd had a little bit more spotting over the weekend, but nothing major. But obviously at that point it's too early to feel kicks or anything like that. And again, I wasn't overly worried. I think I was just like, "Oh, right, okay, we'll just wait and see." So I went in and they put the probe on my tummy to give me a scan, and they couldn't because again I was early. So at that point, I think I had just hit 9 weeks according to the period math.
Mm.
Um, and they were probing around, couldn't find anything. So they gave me an internal scan, which I did not know
Mm.
was a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and oh, just I still remember lying on that thing, and there was two medical students in the room,
Mm.
and one was a woman, one was a man, and the the young guy looked mortified. And I was kind of lying there, and I was like, "Excuse me, could you do me a favor?" And he was like, "Yeah, I was like, "You just take like 3 inches to the side," and he was like, "Why?" I was like. He went, oh, okay. And then he went, woofed and moved over. So it was a bit of like hilarity, and I was like, this is embarrassing, this is awkward. So they used the internal probe, found the baby, and couldn't find a heartbeat. So it looked as if I think it was 6 weeks and it was like 6 weeks and 5 days or something that measured that. So it had happened a couple of weeks
A
before.
couple weeks. Yeah.
But obviously I was completely unaware. And I just remember asking, like, what do you do now?
Mm.
I just didn't know what to do. I was totally blindsided, I think, because I kind of was like, I'm quite optimistic. I never jumped straight to the worst conclusion. So I was like, everything's probably okay. So I was a bit like, oh, right, so what do we do now? And the, I remember the lady doing the scan had said, "Oh, do you want a picture? Do you want a scan picture?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, because that's all I'm going to have." So they printed out like 3 or 4 pictures and put them in a little envelope for me. And they told me I was going to need a D&C. So they were like, "We'll make an appointment at Wishaw. You'll need to go into Wishaw and go under general anaesthetic and get the D&C." So I was like, "Right, okay." So we came out, and our house is like a 5-minute drive away from the hospital. And we just stood outside, and I couldn't even cry. Like, I was just in
Mm.
shock
Yeah.
because obviously by this point we had picked a name. We had started thinking about decorating a spare bedroom, like what the colours were going to be. I had bought some stuff, like I'd bought a lovely, like this wee funky bib with skulls and crossbones on it. I know it doesn't sound nice, but it was very cute. I got
Very
my
you.
very me, yeah. It had stars on it. I'd got my husband a t-shirt that had like Star Wars writing, like I am the father,
Mm.
because we are massive Star Wars fans. So yeah, there was all these things that I had, my head was going, and we had planned these things, and it just wasn't going to happen. And
Mm.
it took a while to kind of get my head around. And I remember we went home, and I was like, I'm going to need to phone my mum. So I phoned my mum, and it was just my mum and I are so like it's frightening sometimes, and I was just like, Mum, I've just been to the hospital. I'd had a bit of bleeding, and unfortunately, it looks like I've had a miscarriage, and there was like absolute silence at the end of the phone,
Yeah.
and she was like, "Right, I'm coming round," and I went, "I don't need you to come round. It's okay." She went, "No, I'm coming round," and I went, "Mum, honestly, it's okay. I don't need you to come round." And she went, "Right, is is Mark okay?" And I went,
Mm.
"No, he's not." I was like, "He's absolutely heartbroken." And she said, I remember when I had a miscarriage," she went, and she was a little bit further on than me. She said, "Nobody remembered your dad. Nobody remembered
Yeah.
that your dad was going through a loss as well." So she was really mindful of him, which I was so appreciative of, because people do forget about the dad in that
Yeah.
situation. There's 2 people that are upset here, 2 people that have had these hopes and dreams, and yeah, it's a tricky thing to kind of navigate. And my husband is not very good at sharing his feelings. He is very much like, here's a box, we'll put the feelings in the box, we'll bury it, and we will never talk about it again. Whereas I'm like a feelings explosion. I'm like, let's talk about feelings, everybody. So he was very stoic and very quiet. And I think that was his way. He was just making sure I was all right. And because I was physically going through it as well,
Yeah.
um, he was more mindful of just making sure I was okay. So sure enough, about half an hour later, my mum appeared at the back door with rolls and ham salad,
Bless her.
because she's a feeder, and she's like, "You're probably not eating today," and I was like, "No, I haven't." So she's like, "Eat the roll and ham salad." I was like, "Right, okay, mum," and some bottles of juice and stuff. So yeah, my mum went into practical mode, which is exactly what I do in all situations. And my husband phoned his mum, and she just like was roaring and greeting down the phone, which our mums are very different people, and that's her way of dealing with it. My mum goes into practical mode. So yeah, it was really odd. And then I got a phone call to say you need to come into Wishaw, whatever the day and the time was. And I'd never been in Wishaw Hospital before, because the only reason you would really go there is if you're going to the maternity unit.
Mm.
um, and I went along, and my mum had said, "Do you want me to come with you?" And I was like, "No, no, no, it's fine, but we'll be there together." And she said, "Well, the thing is, when you go off to theatre, he'll be on his own, and
Yeah.
that's a horrible place to be sitting on your own." So I asked him, and he went, "Oh, no, no, it's fine. Tell her it's fine." And I was like, "Right, okay." And then he kind of went, "Oh, well, if she wants to come, it's okay." And I'm so glad she was there, because I've never been in Wishaw Hospital before. And we went along to the ward we're supposed to be in, and it was a maternity ward.
Yeah.
And we went in the front, we went in the ward door, walked up to the desk, told them why we were there, and they put us in the very first room in the ward. But we were on a maternity ward, which was full of waddling, extremely pregnant and labour ladies, and lots of crying newborn babies.
Yeah.
And that for me was the hardest part because, um, people, the anaesthesiologist came in for a chat, one of the nurses came in for a chat, there was doctors come in, like every time somebody opened the door, the newborn baby crying just got louder and louder and louder. And nobody told me that that's where we were going. I was not prepared for it in the slightest. And I know that I can't remember the lady's name, but there's a lady who's been campaigning because she'd clearly been through the same thing as I had. And she's been campaigning that women who've suffered loss and are having to go through procedures are not kept in the labour wards because, that's actual torture. Why would you
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah.
But I'm assuming it's a space thing, like that's just where people went. But yeah, I remember getting wheeled off to theatre, and I'd had a couple of operations before, and I remember getting wheeled through, and they like wheel you through, and it because I was in the very first room in the ward, they wheeled me right through the labour ward, and all I
Oh,
could see was
Jesus.
all these windows with these mums and their newborn babies, and I was absolutely breaking my heart. And one of the nurses that was with me, she went, "Oh, are you worried about the anaesthetic?" And I went, "No, I'm looking at all these mums and their newborn babies, and I'm actually heartbroken."
Yeah.
And she just went, "Oh," and that was it. And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
okay." So went and got the D&C. That was horrible. Came back, and I remember I'm annoyingly good. I really snap out of anaesthetic really, really quickly. And every time I've ever had one, they're like that. How are you awake? And I'm like, obviously I'm missing out on something, so I'm wide awake. And I got wheeled back to my room and all the rest of it. And I've been away for a couple hours, and I was really, really, really glad that my mum was there because her and my husband had sat just like shooting the breeze, chatting about nonsense, and it really took his mind off it because he was worried about me.
Yeah,
He
of
was
course.
very sad. He was heartbroken himself. So yeah, there's all these things that you don't think about and you don't know are actually a thing
Yeah.
until you start going through that process. Um, and yeah, it was a really, really tricky one. And I remember like once I'd had the miscarriage, I'd phoned like my best friend at the time, and um, I told her, and again, like 20 minutes later, she appeared at my back door, and she just stood. I opened the back door, and she just threw herself on top of me,
Mhm.
and the two of us just stood and had a really ugly cry and a big snottery cry, and there was so much love and support around us, which was so lovely. And given that like hardly anybody knew that I was
Mm.
pregnant in the first place, but telling people that you've lost a baby, there's almost this kind of, I don't know, it's almost like a shame that comes with
Mm.
it. Like, my job is to keep this baby safe, and I've not done that. And, people going, "Oh, what happened?" "Oh, I was helping my friend move house." "Oh, you must have lifted a big heavy box." I didn't.
Mm.
And I had that in my heart for so long that it must have been me because I
Mm.
did something wrong. But then obviously when we got the measurements and stuff, the baby had died 2 weeks before, so it was
Mm.
nothing to do with me helping my
Mm.
friend move house. It just had happened. Um, and then, you know, there's people say things to you and it's thoughtless. It's never
Mm.
done with malicious intent, but it's just pure thoughtlessness. So we heard, "At least you know you can get pregnant."
Mm.
"Oh, you'll have fun trying again," was one that I got. And oh, it obviously wasn't meant to be, which any time I heard made me want to reach out and punch somebody's face in.
Yep.
So now, whenever I know anybody that's going through it, my words are, "I'm so sorry. It's absolutely shit. If you need
Mm.
anything, I'm here." And
Mhm.
then I always check in with them a wee bit later on because it's not till usually a couple of weeks later that things kick in. Um, but yeah, it was a very interesting time. So I
Mm.
had I had lost the baby about the June, I think it was the June or the July 2005. So the baby would have been due March 2006. And I remember that Christmas, I'd found, so we decided that we weren't going to actively try for another baby. We were just going to see what happened. And I'd gone out for a Christmas night out with a couple of my friends, one of the friends who we were ugly crying together. And we were in the pub and we were going to go, bear in mind it was 2005, so we were going to the dancing
Off to the
and
dance.
we was going to the dancing and I was sitting and I had a Jack Daniels and Diet Coke and I had 2 shots of tequila rosé because
Oh,
that's the roll in those days. Now even the thought, I'm like, oh God, the heartburn. But I was sitting and I was sipping on this Jack Daniels and I was like, I feel really, really sick. And I felt drunk really, really quickly. And I am still a bit like an ox. It takes a lot to get me drunk. So I got up to go to the bar and this guy brushed past me and hit me on the chest and I was like, my boobs were on fire.
oh,
And
okay.
I immediately was like, I'm pregnant.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, oh no. So I had left, and I mean, it was afternoon drinking too, because that's how I rolled in those days. So I left the pub and I went to the Superdrug round the corner and got a pregnancy test and went home. I did the pregnancy test and it was positive. So then cue me being absolutely manic that I'd obviously ruined this kid's life because I'd had a couple of Jack Daniels and a few tequila roses. And it was going to have 2 heads and 6 arms, and like I'd created a monster. So the guilt, the
Mm,
motherly guilt kicked in really early that time. Um, but that I'm not an anxious person, I never ever have been. But the anxiety I felt for she was due in the August 2007, and the whole entire time I was just a ball of anxiety and
yeah.
guilt because when I found out I was pregnant, it was the December, and again I was really early on. I was about 6 weeks, and I phoned up the maternity unit and explained that I'd had a loss, and they were like, "Right, just come up." So they did the internal scan again, fun, but everything was okay, and they were like, "You're due your normal scan at 12 weeks, but we'll get you back in 2 weeks just to check." And I was
Oh,
like, "Right,
fabulous.
okay." Went in 2 weeks later, did another scan, everything was fine. So that relieved it a bit. But then we came to March 2007, and yeah, it was every time we hit a March, the guilt because that baby wasn't here.
Mm,
And, if I'd had that first baby, my eldest wouldn't be my eldest. I wouldn't
yep,
have her.
yep.
And she's amazing, and I wouldn't change her for the world. I change her attitude, but the problem is it's my attitude, so I've only got myself to blame. But every March I was so sad, and I think, oh, that baby would be 1 now, that
Yeah.
baby would be 2 now. And that went on for years and years. And, I said to you just before we came on, I'd I'd nicked out before we started chatting, and I realised I'm like, oh, it's May. I'd kind of forgot this year. And
Mm,
it doesn't make me love that kid any less or anything. It's just time moves on, and the kid is always with me. It's a part of me, but that baby would be 19 now,
yeah.
which is bonkers. That baby would be an adult, would be old enough to drive, could be away, moved out, like I was at that age, engaged, like I was at
Engaged,
that
yep.
age. It's bonkers.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly I'm not old enough to have a 19-year-old.
Absolutely not.
No, because I'm only 29, so I don't know how that math works. But yeah, it's one of these things that the every March came along and I'd be sad. But then I would be sitting there, like in March 2008, I was sitting there with my gorgeous wee chubby baby who was the absolute light of my life. And I was so thankful that
Mm,
she was here and she was safe and we'd managed to get through it. But yeah, those 9 months were rough. There was a few times I ended up, I'd be sitting and working, I'd be like, not feel the baby kick. And I did like having a glass of ice cold water, having a bit of chocolate, have some orange juice. And if I didn't feel anything, and the maternity unit at Hare Myers were amazing. And I'd phone up and go, and I've not felt any movement. Right, tell me the last time. Okay, right, come on up. And they'd strap me to the monitor and strap me up. And then they'd be like, give me water, give me some chocolate. And they calm me down. And then they're like, okay, you might not be feeling it, but it's happening. And here's the little printout thing. And we can see all the kicks. and everything's absolutely fine. So yeah, I was a bit crazy because I was just worried.
I don't think that's crazy at all, though, do you know? And I think that's something I hear often is women worried that they're coming across as being a bit neurotic, do you know, or a bit over the top. And it's like, do you know what? If that's what you need to get you through those 9 months, then that is a small price to pay. Do you know? It's like if that's what needs to happen, then that's what needs to happen. Because I think that antenatal anxiety and that just constant worry is it can rob people of the joy of their actual pregnancy. And I remember one woman talking that I worked with talking about like she felt like after her first loss she'd lost, and she called it the naivety of pregnancy, where like she just in her first pregnancy she just hadn't considered that she might not have a baby at the end of it. And
Yeah.
then with her second pregnancy, it's like that was all that she could think about, and she used to get quite upset when people were just cruising through their pregnancy without any worries, and she was like, do they not know? And it's like, no, the vast majority of people don't know until they're walking in that path.
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. And I remember at the time, like a former friend of mine had found out like through the jungle drums that their partner was pregnant and they were due in March at the
Ah,
same
right, okay.
time. And um my husband used to always joke that wouldn't it be great if we were having twins? And I'm like, no, that would be hellish. And he's like, no, it'd be great because then we could just have two and then that'd be it, we'd be done. And I'm like, yeah, very funny. And we found out that this friend was having twins and
Mhm.
it was due at the same time. And I was just like, hi, universe, sorry, what? And
Yeah.
and obviously because your brain is so hypersensitive to these things, everywhere I looked, people were pushing prams, were really pregnant, were walking about. I saw every blooming newborn squishy baby in the world because obviously my brain was focused on that. Um, but yeah, that was really, really tricky. But
Mm.
I then so she was born in August 2007 and like I had her pregnancy was amazing. Like I didn't like I said, I had no sickness, I had nothing like that. My anxiety was through the roof. And that exactly what you said, it's the naivety and it's that when you've gone through that process you're constantly on edge and thinking, well, as soon as you wake up, right, okay, I better feel a kick. And
Mm.
I did have a word with myself a few months in, and like, you don't want to waste this. Because I didn't know how many kids we were going to have. I didn't know if I was going to be pregnant. I didn't know if it was going to go full term. Like, I had no idea. And I thought, as much as I'm stressing out about it, equally, I need to enjoy being pregnant. So I did calm down eventually. And I am very much in the school of thought of what will be.
Yeah.
And absolutely she was meant to be here. She's my mini me. She's got my attitude all over the back. She's got her dad's work ethic and brains and is an amazing human and she'll be 18 soon. Um,
Wow.
which is mad. Again, I'm only 29. I don't know how that works. Um, and then we had a little gap. So I always knew that I wanted more than one. I was hopeful that we'd have more than one. And like I said, I'm the eldest of three.
Mm.
My husband grew up with one sister, and he always wanted more than one as well. But just life got in the way, like paying for paying for a baby, paying mortgages. There was the financial crash in 2007. Like, there was a lot going on, and I got made redundant when she was two from a job that I absolutely loved. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And financially, we just couldn't afford it. So it wasn't until she was seven that I then had my second one.
Mm.
And the pregnancy with her was rough in a different way. And I didn't have any stresses the way that I did the first time round. I wasn't panicking all the time. I wasn't worried about, she was dead active and she kicked the bejesus out of me all the time. So like I'd literally wake up and she'd be like, boom, morning mum. And I'm like, oh right, okay, we're good, we're good. And I suppose I did subconsciously like do my kick counts and all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't manic about it because I do feel like with the second pregnancy that I I did worry my way through most of it and
Mm.
I didn't want that to happen again. So but with her I ended up with gestational diabetes and ended up having to go I had to go 2 weeks, I think it was, to Wishaw General again. Me and Wishaw, honestly. I had to go there again every fortnight to the clinic and get my bloods done and get a scan. And because when you've got gestational diabetes, you can end up having like a beer baby. And the first one was like £6.12, and they were like, "Oh, you're going to have a £9 pounder," and I was like, "Sorry, what?" Um, she was £8.3, which was
Oh.
quite dinky, but
Mhm.
compared to her sister was ginormous. Um, and she was again totally perfectly healthy, and she had a really fast labour, and I had a lovely time. It was great. Had my music on. I had all the things that I didn't get to do the first time. I managed to do the second time, so that
Oh,
was
beautiful.
nice.
Mhm.
And then, funnily enough, ended up back in the hospital 17 months later having my son, which was fun because he was £6, no, he was £8.14 and
Mm.
an actual bear of a baby. But I had problems with him when I was pregnant. So that was probably my scariest pregnancy, actually, where he had an issue with, it was something to do with blood supply in his brain, because I don't know how, and I, whenever I've asked, they've not been able to tell me, but I had an antibody issue. So when I had my daughter in the August, I got my gallbladder out in the December. There was a lot going on in
I was going to
2014.
say it was a busy time.
It was, me and the
Jeez.
hospitals were like that.
Mhm.
And I went in and they did my pre-op checks for my gallbladder, and they were like, "Oh, you've got an antibody issue, and basically if I need a blood transfusion, I need really specific blood."
Okay.
I was all right, okay. And they were like, "All you need to do is carry this wee plastic card around with you, just in case you ever need a transfusion, and we know." And I was like, "Right, that's fine." So when I fell pregnant with my son about 5 months later, I was like, "I had this antibody thing. Is there any issue?" "No, no, no, it'll be fine." I went, "Right." So I'd gone for I must have been my 12-week scan, and they'd said to me about this little like blood supply in the brain, and I can't remember all the technicalness of it, but basically they were like, "We're going to have to monitor you, because if that doesn't pick up or change or whatever it was it to do, you might end up having a premature baby." And I was like,
Okay.
"Oh, okay." So that was me again, every week in Wishaw, getting
Oh
bloods
God.
done, getting a scan, and every week they'd measure this little vein, this little bit of his brain to see. And thankfully, we didn't have any issue. He was born at 38.5 weeks, I think it was, and he was absolutely fine. At 38.5 weeks, he was £8.14. So I'm really, really glad that they induced me, because that'd have been madness. Um, and yeah, we ended up with an 8-year-old, a 17-month-old, and a newborn baby. So
Wow.
life was, I know, wow, what was I thinking? Would not change a thing, because now they're nearly 18, nearly 11, and 9, and
Mm.
they're amazing. The two little ones don't know life without each other. They've always had each other. They're as thick as Steve and dead, dead close. Apart from if she touches his Pokemon stuff or tries to go near his PlayStation, it's the
You're
end
right.
of the actual world. Um, but yeah, and I was thinking about it earlier on, like, I always say, like, I'm a mum of three, but I'm not, I'm a mum of four. And I remember reading a thing that it really, at the time, I sobbed my heart out. And it was about when you're pregnant, they're all like their cells are in there, they're always part of you. So no matter what, you always carry that baby with you.
Mm.
And it made me, oh, like I said, it broke me at the time, but actually it's really comforting. And
Mm.
when Beth was learning about the birds and the bees at school, and they were learning about baby loss, and she asked me, and I had said, "Well, okay." So I thought, well, now's the time to tell you. So I told her, I said, "Before I had you, I lost the baby." And I've had the conversation with the 11-year-old, and
Mm. Okay.
I think it's important to have these conversations, because when I had the loss, I remember she gave me the envelope with the scan picture of the baby in it, and she gave me, it was like a it was a help group or something, a support group.
Mm.
And it was days later, I couldn't bring myself to look at the picture. And it was before I was going into the D&C, and I thought, I need to look at this picture. So I opened up and looked at it. And if I shut my eyes now, I can see it. I can see the outline of its wee head. And
Mm.
the bit of paper inside it had the details on it. And I looked it up, and it was it was like a Facebook group. And I looked up and I thought, okay. And I phoned them up, and they were like, "Oh, you can come along." And I don't know. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't bring myself to go. And I don't know what it was. But then I started looking and there was nothing other than this. It was run out of a church, this thing.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't want there to be any churchy agenda, and nothing against any church. I was born and raised and brought up in the Catholic Church, but that's not what I needed. I
Yeah.
needed somebody to talk to. And again, I was young. I was like 25, and I was the first one out of all my friends to get married, the first one to have kids. So I had nobody to talk to. The only person that I knew that had been through a miscarriage was my mum.
Your
And
mum. Yeah.
my mum at that point, I think the miscarriage she had was about 5 years before I was born. So it was
Right.
like 30 years before. So obviously things were totally different because she said, oh, I'm glad you've got a scan picture because we didn't have scans in your day. And I was like, all right,
Mm.
okay.
Hmm.
So she didn't have scan pictures for me or my middle sister. 1987, when she had my youngest sister, they'd introduced scans, so she does have a scan picture of that sister, which is lovely. But I didn't even think of things like that. I was like,
Yeah.
you just assume everybody's got a scan photo. So there was nobody to talk to. There was nobody. So that's why I think we need to talk about these things. I felt so alone and
Mm.
lost, and I had all these feelings. And as much as, like I said at the beginning, I am like a feelings bomb. Come on, let's talk about things. I never ever used to be. I'm very stoic. So, and I still, I suppose now to an extent, if I've got something going on, I keep it inside and I process it all in my head. And then once I'm ready, I will be like, bleh, and
Mm.
talk all about it. But then I was firmly in the bottle it all in, and I had questions. And I don't even know what those questions were, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk to somebody about it. And
Yeah.
thankfully, my husband is great, and we talked about it a lot. But I also know he was going through a grieving process too. He was absolutely devastated, and I
Yeah.
didn't want to keep talking about it because I didn't want to keep upsetting him. But then in hindsight, saying that we had picked a name, so like mentioning the name, saying the name, talking about the baby, saying, oh, the baby would be 2 today or whatever it
Mm.
is. And, when I told him that I was coming to talk to you, he was a bit like, oh, you're going to talk about it. That's quite personal. And I'm like, it is. But there are so many people who go through it that they don't know who to talk to, they don't know who to
Yeah.
turn to. I've been through it once. I have my own unique experience of it. Everybody's is. But at the same time, I wish I'd had somebody that I could go and talk to who just
Mm.
knew what I was going through. And I think, my friend coming in and just giving me that hug and us having an ugly cry was exactly what I needed at that moment. And that
Yeah.
I just needed to hold on to somebody that wasn't my mum or my husband and
Yeah.
just have a good sob.
Yeah.
But yeah, there needs, and I know now there are a lot more support out there, and people like you who I would never ever have known to go to a trained professional to talk
Mm.
to something
Yeah.
about something like that, because
Yeah.
there's almost this, and I think it is still there that, well, it's not a real a real loss. It's not a real grief because you didn't have that baby. It was
Mm.
just a miscarriage. It happened before. So I think definitely people that are like you that can help people process their grief and also take away the anxiety if they do go and have want to have more kids, that it's not going to happen. It might not happen every time,
Yeah.
which I think is a big thing too.
Yeah. And I think often that's what the work looks like when people do come to somebody like me. It's like, I know you and I touched on this before about like it's all of the losses that come with a pregnancy loss. It's not just about the loss in that moment. It's like there's so many other things that come hand in hand with that. And especially given that you've had somebody in your world that's gone on to have a baby that would have been due at the same time as yours, and just all those wee markers along the way that really just knock the wind out of people's sails. And I think sometimes that question of like, are we ready to try again? Because you can't unknow what you know when you've gone through that experience. And I think often it's that thing of like, are we mentally, physically, emotionally actually resourced enough to be able to do this dance again, and run the risk of potentially having another loss? So, yeah.
That's exactly it. And I'll be honest, I don't think I gave that part a second thought.
Mm, mm-hmm,
I don't
mm-hmm,
think at any point did my brain go, am I actually ready for this? Like,
mm,
I knew that I was ready to have, because it's really funny. So, my husband, as soon as we got married, people were like, when are you having a baby? And bearing in
mm,
mind, I was 23 and he was 24. when we got married, and we were like, whoa, calm down. Just because we've got married doesn't mean we're going to have kids anyway, but like, let us enjoy being married first. And when we started, I still remember we had been to the cinema, we were driving home, and I'm driving up the road, and my husband went, I think I'm ready to have kids. And I was like, sorry, what? And he's like, oh, not right now, you're driving. I was like, oh, right, okay. But it was one of those, he was like, yeah, I think, and because we'd had like our first year married, and like we'd been on holiday, we had been to hundreds of gigs, we'd like been out with our friends, and like I said, we were the first out of our friend group to get married. So some of them were still young, free and single, some of them were in long-term relationships. We had loads of like great nights out, we'd been away camping, all these things that like you're meant to do when you're 24.
Yeah,
And I think something just clicked in him that he's like, okay. And I was like, oh,
I'm ready
okay.
now.
That had just been like, come on. But also I was like, he'll tell me he's ready when he's ready. And he
Mhm.
did. And that's how, like I said, when we decided to start trying, like it just clicked and I fell pregnant like 2 weeks later. Like it was that. So obviously my romantic brain's going, it was meant to be. The universe is with me. Yay. So that's why I think when I did have the bit of spotting and things, that at no point was I was like, I mean, it's always in the back of your head, but because I'm optimistic, I'm like, oh, it's probably just a wee bit of
You'll be
spot,
all right.
nothing to
Yeah.
worry about. So yeah, I think it's, and
Mm.
like you said, when I fell pregnant the second time, we absolutely told nobody till I got to my 12 weeks. I told my mum because it's my mum, but we told nobody else, and I was terrified of telling people because what if it did happen again? And then I kept thinking, well, okay, it happened at 6 weeks. I didn't find out till nearly 9 weeks. I'm now 13 weeks. I've had my scan. I've had, by that point, I'd had like 4 scans.
Mm.
Everything's fine. The heartbeat's strong, blah, blah, blah. But what if? And it's just constantly niggling at the back of your head. And I, I held off decorating the spare room, and I held off buying all the things, and I think, I didn't want to have my house full of stuff
Yeah.
just in case.
Mm.
And you know the bigger I got, and I was 16 weeks when I felt her kick for the first time, and I still remember I was sitting in work at my desk and I got an absolute boot, and I was like, oh my God, I just felt the baby kicking. And I was so excited. And Mark was able to hold my tummy and feel her kicking, and he was just talking away to her, and like, it was lovely. We had, like, it was so nice, but I always had at the back of my head, let's not get too excited just in
Mm.
case. And like you
Mhm.
said, I do feel a bit like my joy was robbed,
Mhm.
but I suppose I was just being a bit overly cautious. So you know me, I'm a planner. I love to plan. I like to plan well ahead. That's how I roll as a human being. But I was just ever so slightly just pulling back a wee bit and making
Caution.
sure that I was a bit cautious and I wasn't buying all the stuff. And it's funny because I think about 3 weeks before she was due, because again, you have to do your period math. So I did my period math, and I said to the midwife, I was like, I've done my maths and I'm due on the 6th of August. And she's like, you're due the 13th of August. I was like, no, I'm due the 6th, but okay then. Your
Okay.
maths is probably right because you're a professional. No idea. And one of my best friend's birthdays is on the 6th of August. So I had I think that was a no, that must have been a Monday. It was a Monday, and we were all supposed to be going out for Mexican food for his birthday. And on the Sunday, we were like, right, we'll go up to the shopping centre, we'll go and get a birthday present and stuff, we'll go for some lunch. And we went to this pub that used to be in East Kilbride Town Centre, and we were going to see Transformers. We booked the tickets to go see Transformers, went for a bit of lunch, and I went to the toilet and I had a show. So it was like,
Okay.
I was like, oh, so I came out,
Oh.
I think my waters had broke. And Mark started laughing, and he was like, do you think we could still go and see Transformers? And I was like, probably, but do you want to risk it? And he was like, no, let's go. So we left and went up the road, and it was the start of labour and all the rest of it. So she ended up being born on my friend's birthday. So she's got a birthday buddy
No.
with her uncle, which is lovely. Um, but yeah, it's
Mm.
funny. Just like now I'm thinking about it, like my brain's like pew 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 pew. going off
I
on
was
own.
really interested in like what you said as well. Like you kind of touched on it a few times about like that belief of don't tell anybody before the 12-week scan, because you really had that drilled into you. Then
Mm.
actually coming into your second pregnancy of like even more so not wanting to tell people. And I was thinking as you were talking about that, I was wondering what way you went with it in terms of what felt right for you. Because I could also, when you mentioned it the first time, I was thinking, gosh, I wonder if that then means that in subsequent pregnancies it's better to tell people earlier on, so you've at least got that village of support round about you, I suppose.
I know it's funny, isn't it? Because I know some people like they find out they're pregnant in 5 or 6 weeks and they tell everybody. And part of me now even still goes, oh, like, but
Right,
it's
so you still hold that.
self-preservation
Mm,
because I'm like, but what if? But then also, but what if it's not? What if
mm,
everything's okay? Because I had that with my first ever pregnancy, and then I had three other pregnancies that were absolutely fine. I
yeah,
got past the 12 weeks, and with the when I had my middle daughter, we did the same thing. We were like, we'll wait till we get to the 12 weeks, and we got to the 12 weeks, and nobody like I didn't even tell my mum, and it's funny because at that point my daughter was 7 and I'd taken her to like a ceramic painty thing and it had a soft play in it and she was away playing and I was with my mum. It must have been a school holiday or something. And my mum was like, if you two are planning on having more kids, you better get on with it because she's 7 now. You're, what was I at that point, 32, 33? And you're getting on a bit and blah blah blah. But I was sitting there like 3 months pregnant and she'd no idea. And
right,
it was the next, I think it was like 2 or 3 days later, I had to go for my 12-week scan. And for me at that point, I thought the most important person here is my eldest because she's going to be a big sister.
right.
So we told her before we told anybody else. And it's so funny because every time she would blow out her candle, she would wish for a brother or a sister. And she knew that she knew she thought babies came from Wishaw. So every time I had to go to like Wishaw, she'd be like, am I getting a brother or a sister? And I'm like, not today. Yeah, she used to like ask Santa for a brother or a sister. So for me, when we got to tell her, like it was funny. I was like, so you're getting a surprise, and she used to collect and make friend Lego, and she went, is it the Lego cruise ship? And I went, no, it's not the Lego cruise ship. And we showed her the scan picture, and she was so happy and full
Oh,
of
bless her.
joy. And once we told her, I was like, go and tell Gran. So she went down to tell my mum, and my mum looked at the scan and then looked at me and went, you lying little madam. She went, how did you sit there with a straight bloody face? That was like 2 days ago. And
Never cracked a light.
I was like, poker face, mum. And she's like that. Oh, I'm so happy for you. She's like, everything okay? Everything's fine. How far on are you? 13 weeks. And I think it's even now when I say to mum, 13, she went, oh, okay then. Everything's okay.
Right.
Which
Mm.
obviously, as we know, isn't always the indicator, but yeah. And then obviously, like I said, I was very quickly pregnant with my son, but I'd had my gallbladder out in between, and I was still on like hefty painkillers and anti-inflammatories when I fell
Mm.
pregnant. So I told my mum really early on because I was ill, like I was really, really ill. And I was like, I was weaning off all these crazy cocktail of prescription medication. And again, I was
Mm.
like, he's going to have 7 eyes and 4 ears on the top of his head. And like I had all these things going on that I thought, oh, great, I've done it again. But he's absolutely fine. He's cool. He has all his ears are in the right place where they're meant to be. But yeah.
Listen to how strong that mum guilt is, though. It's like, wow, that's a force to be reckoned with, isn't it?
Oh, the mum guilt is something else. Like,
Mm.
and I get like other things like breastfeeding. Oh my God. So I was determined that I was going to breastfeed. And with the first one, I managed it for a month and it was the most hellish month of my entire life. She wouldn't latch. When she latched, it hurt. And I mean,
Mm.
nobody prepares you for the pain of breastfeeding for the first few, like 4 or 5 days. Once you get over that part, it's absolutely fine. But that was hellish. And it was robbing the joy of having a newborn baby. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't enjoying it because I was het up and stressed out, and I know that that wasn't helping either. But oh my God, I felt guilty about putting her on formula milk till she was about 10.
Mm.
And then obviously every time she got a cold, I'm like, oh, it's because I didn't breastfeed her for longer. But that kid has got the best immune system out of all three of my kids,
Yeah.
so that's weird. And then the middle one. I breastfed her for 3 weeks, but we had other things going on with her. And then found out she had a dairy allergy and lots of other things going on. And then the little one, when I was pregnant with him, so bearing in mind at this point I have a 17-month-old and an 8-year-old. And I was chatting to my husband and I was like, oh, I'm going to give breastfeeding a bash again. He's like, going to just give it up. Like, why are you
Just
putting
not.
pressure on yourself? And I'm like, I'm not putting pressure on myself. I was like, but actually, if I can do it, I'm going to. If I can, I've tried it and that's that. And they literally, he was born and they put him on my chest and he went, off, and that was him.
Oh,
Like,
bless.
he was amazing. He was an absolute breastfeeding dream. So he was, and actually, it was so much easier because I had hands free at all times and with this mental 17-month-old. But you always find something to be guilty about. Like
Mm,
my daughter came home from school yesterday and they're away with their sun hat because obviously the weather's glorious, right? And like they've got their Factor 50 in their bag, they've got a sun hat, blah blah blah. And she came in and she's got a big red patch down her arm. And I was like, did you not put sun cream on? Ah, I forgot my arms, mum. And I'm like, oh, the guilt, blah blah. And then I'm like, hold on a second. You're nearly 11, you know how to put sun cream on, but the guilt never leaves.
mm,
It's here like a little gremlin, like, you should have put cream on. So
mm-hmm.
they're both away to school this morning with Factor 50 from here
Doused.
to here. I'm like, top it up at playtime.
Oh dear. Thank you for, and I know obviously, like, I think when people have to are invited to go back into their story, it's never an easy conversation to have. But I think your honesty about it and just how it's kind of echoed through all your other pregnancies is something that, again, I don't think many people necessarily talk about. I think there's an expectation that, you get yourself through it and you get on with life. But I think that real reality of, this loss never has left you. You can think about your baby and you can bring them back into your heart in any moment. There's been a real lived experience of how you've navigated your other pregnancies as well, in light of that. And I just think the more we talk about this, the more it normalizes it for people because sadly, I still find that I'll have people come to me for support and they're like, oh yeah, I had this experience or I had this, either pregnancy loss, miscarriage, however, whatever language they want to use. Like, and I've not dealt with it or I've not grieved. And it's like, you have grieved because you've lived all these years with it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't pop up every now and again in your day-to-day life. And I think sometimes, as we were saying earlier on, when it's around significant dates, anniversaries,
Mm.
it's so natural and normal that that's where our thinking goes to. It's just that remembering of what could have been, what you'd hoped for.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, you're right. That baby is always with me.
Yeah.
Always with, and I've got 4 stars on my necklace, and each initial for each baby is on my stars. And I've got a little ring that my husband bought me last year that's got 4 stars, one for each of my babies. And, every time I look, I'm sitting typing away, and every time I look down, I'm like, oh.
Mm.
And it's about acknowledging them as well. Like that was our first pregnancy. It was special. It was so special. I still like, remember that panic of, oh my God, I've been drinking Jack Daniels and tequila rosé. Ah, sorry, baby. And of the guilt on that, I'm like, that was because I had that night out. It wasn't. It was nothing to do with that night out. And I think we immediately jumped to it's our fault, blame us for everything. But I
Yeah.
think if I can leave it on one thing, I would say the main kind of takeaways is don't say don't say the first thing that comes into your head. Stop and think, is this the right thing to say? Hearing things like at least you can get pregnant or you can try again or it wasn't meant to be is not what somebody needs to hear.
No.
They just need you to be there. They just need your support. That's really shit. I'm so sorry. What can I do for you? And
Mm.
also don't forget the dad because they're
Mm.
going through it too. As much as yes, as the person who was carrying the baby, I physically had to go through it, which was hellish as well. Um, he was going through a grieving process too, and for that, I'm so thankful that my mum was really mindful of him because she
Yeah.
remembered how my dad was when she went through it. So, yeah, that's the two kind of things I would take away. Think about what you say before you say it, offer some support, and think about the dad as well.
Mm. I feel, gosh, there's so many things now. My brain's going, whoo, 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 so many different things that I think we could keep talking about, but I'm conscious of our time for today and I don't want this to become a 3 hour episode for us. But yeah, maybe there's some things in this that we can pick up again with, because I think there is something really important in what you said about just how men and women can grieve differently. And I think traditionally there's been some stereotypes around that and what's expected, and now we know much more about what the grieving process looks like. We see that it's not actually necessarily so much about gender and just about difference of human beings. And I had done some training last night with a woman who had quoted a lot of her research when I was doing my master's paper, and it was lovely to hear her talking about the idea of people being either an intuitive griever or an instrumental griever. So instrumental's the doer, that's the person that gets the bits done and focuses on the pragmatic, practical stuff. And then the intuitive griever's the person that's maybe more in the emotional aspect of it and can sit with their feelings. So yeah, I think there's maybe another episode for us to do talking about some of that stuff as well, because I think that is really important to recognise that it's no right and wrong or good and bad, or, you're grieving or he's no coping. It's like we're just different beings trying to navigate a really hellish experience.
Yeah, and also neither of us had ever gone through that before.
Yeah, you're
So
making it up as you go along.
yeah, you're totally, totally winging it, which
Yeah.
to be fair is how I've navigated parenting for the last 18 years. Because like when my sisters have had kids are like, what do you do for how do you know how to do this? And I'm like winging it since 2007. Like I'm not. Um I've educated myself on stuff, but like there is every grieving process is different. I lost my grandparents and I had different relationships with absolutely love both of them dearly, but they died at different parts stages of my life. So
Mm,
when I lost my gran, I was 17 and I was heartbroken, but there was some trauma around that. And I was 27, I think, when I lost my grandpa. And he was my dad, like he was my father figure. So I was
mm,
heartbroken. And, my husband's lost his grandparents and he was brought up with them. And he deals with things a lot differently than I deal with things. Remember, he just puts them in the box. And I remember having a conversation with somebody who said, when you do that, it's like having a beach ball and putting all your feelings in the beach ball and trying to push it underwater. At some point, that's going to come up and whack you in the face
mm.
because you can't just bite, you have to deal with them. But, you know, I always joke about my husband. I'm like, oh, is that going in the box? And he's like, it's in the box, it's buried down. But that's just how he deals with things, and that's
Mm,
okay. So yeah, I'm much more open now, particularly with the kids, where I'm like, okay, you've got feelings, especially my son, he's a bit of a bottler. So I'm like,
mm.
let it out, talk to me, tell me how you're feeling. And he's getting better at it, although he's still a
There
bit
you go.
very much like his dad.
Mm, mhm. Listen, Claire, thank you so much for this conversation. And I'm always very aware whenever I'm doing these episodes, I'm always very aware of just like we don't get to know the impact this has on people. We don't get to see the change that it might make. So I don't doubt for a second that there's going to be people listening to this that can just really resonate with your journey and what it's been like for you. So yeah, if you're listening along, if you found it helpful, then it would be lovely to know where you're at and how this has been for you. But also, if you think this episode might be handy for somebody you know, if you've got a friend that's navigating miscarriage or somebody in your world that, is trying to make sense of their experience, then please do consider sharing our episode as well, because the more people we can get it to, the better, and hopefully the more chance there is we can generate a wee bit of impact from our conversations at least. I always want to say at the end as well, just make sure that you have subscribed so that you will know whenever next episodes of the podcast come out. And obviously in the show notes, we'll also put some contact details both for myself and for Claire if you might want to reach out. And say, aside from your wonderful honest sharing today, she's also a bloody fantastic VA. So if you need any admin support, Claire's definitely your woman to be hitting up. Um, I think that's all from me. But as I said right at the top of today's show, just please take care of yourself. And likewise to you, Claire, just be gentle with yourself, because I appreciate you're digging up a lot of stuff that you're not talking about every day, do you know, and I appreciate the energy you've put into actually going back through some of this and kind of sharing as openly as you've done for us today.
You're very, very welcome. And like you said, if anybody wants to message me or whatever, I am more than happy to chat.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you. And yeah, I'll be back for another episode.
Bye.
Bye.